If one day you realize you were born into a life script that feels unfair, would you still have the courage to keep living, just to rewrite its ending? Some people grow up surrounded by poverty, fear, and invisible limits. They're taught to stay silent, to obey, to live the way others expect them to. And as the years pass, they slowly forget that they once had the right to dream, to make mistakes, to choose their own path. Tara Westover was one of those people. She was born into a secluded family in the mountains of Idaho, where knowledge was seen as sin and obedience was considered virtue. Her father believed that schools poisoned children's souls, and her mother, out of fear, simply bowed her head and accepted. Tara grew up amid violence and extreme faith, between fear and isolation. She had never been to school, never been taught about the world beyond her home. Yet even in that place where no light seemed to reach, something small and quiet inside her refused to die. A fragile spark trembling in the dark. The desire to know, to understand, to be free. She began to read in secret, to write in secret, to dream of another world. Each page she turned became a breath of life. Each word, a doorway opening toward horizons she had never touched. Educated is not just the story of a girl who overcame adversity. It's the journey of a soul searching for itself. From fear and pain, Tara discovered freedom and peace. She didn't study to prove her worth. She studied to be real, to break free from the life others had written for her. And perhaps, somewhere within us there's also a part that resembles Tara, still trying to live truthfully amid expectations. Still searching for a place we can call our own self. Welcome to Julian Gray, where every book is more than knowledge. It's a mirror that helps you see yourself with gentleness, honesty, and a little more depth each day. There are people who spend their whole lives inside a prison, even though the door was never locked. This prison isn't made of iron bars, but of fear. Fear of being left behind. Fear of being wrong. Fear of losing the love of others. And above all, fear that if they change, they will no longer be accepted. Tara Westover grew up in the mountains of Idaho, where winters stretched endlessly and snow blanketed the sky in white. Her father, a man with bipolar disorder, believed the outside world was full of sin and lies. He feared schools, governments, medicine, anything that challenged his faith. Her mother, intelligent and sensitive, was eventually swallowed by that same fear. She chose silence. She chose obedience, because that was the only way to keep a fragile peace. Tara, the youngest daughter, grew up in a home where every question was seen as rebellion, and every dream needed permission. She had never been to school, never heard anyone speak of the world beyond their mountain. From an early age, she was taught that faith must be absolute, that doubt was a sin, and that the desire to escape was betrayal. She was afraid of her own dreams, afraid that wanting to learn meant betraying her parents, afraid that knowledge would bring punishment, afraid that stepping outside would make her lose everything she loved. And so, fear became her breath, her heartbeat, the only truth she knew. But fear doesn't only come from poverty or isolation. It comes from losing the belief that change is possible. When a child is not allowed to believe in themselves, they learn to stay silent. And when silence lasts too long, the soul begins to shrink, until all that's left is a shadow of who they once were. Yet deep within Tara's heart, something still glimmered, a faint, stubborn light that refused to die. One night in her cold wooden room, she secretly opened an old book. The weak glow of a kerosene lamp fell across the yellowed pages. Each word appeared like a small flame, warming a soul that had long grown cold. With every line she read, Tara began to feel that the world beyond was wider, brighter, and perhaps even kinder. For the first time, she realized that fear wasn't the enemy. It was simply the part of her that had never been heard. Sometimes fear is the longing to step out of the familiar cage, and only when we face it do we finally see the door that leads to freedom. It isn't circumstance that defeats us, but the moment we stop believing we can be different. Tara began to believe. Even if it was just a fragile spark of hope, she believed life could be more than this, that somewhere out there was a world where people could know, understand, and live as their truest selves. That was the moment Tara overcame her first fear. Not through rebellion or noise, but through one quiet act: the courage to believe in herself. And from that small act of faith, her journey to freedom began. Solitude doesn't destroy you. It teaches you how to become yourself. When Tara first entered college, she thought she had finally escaped the darkness. But she didn't yet know. On the other side of freedom lay another kind of loneliness, deeper and colder than anything she had ever known. In her first days, Tara became the subject of curiosity. She dressed differently, spoke awkwardly, didn't understand things everyone else took for granted. The first time she heard the word Holocaust, she raised her hand and asked the professor what it meant. The class fell silent. A few snickers, a few mocking eyes, and a quiet wave of shame crept into her chest. She didn't know who Martin Luther King was, nor why his name carried such emotion. She began to see herself as an outsider, someone who had stepped out of another world, naive and disoriented, like being born again into a place that spoke a language she didn't yet understand. Each day, she went to class in anxiety and returned home in silence. She began to doubt her own worth. On some nights, Tara would sit alone in her small room, listening to cars passing by outside, feeling an emptiness so vast it frightened her. Everything she once believed in seemed to have collapsed, yet she hadn't found anything new to hold on to. And then, in those long, quiet hours, something unexpected began to happen. When there was no one left to agree or disagree, she started to hear a faint voice within. It was soft but steady, whispering, "You're still here. You can begin again." Solitude, she realized, was not punishment. It was space to listen to herself more clearly. Slowly, as the silence deepened, her mind began to clear. The fears that once felt enormous started to lose their power, making room for understanding and compassion. The loneliest days were also the ones in which she grew the most. Because only in solitude do we truly face everything within us, both the wounds and the parts of ourselves waiting to awaken. With no one left to praise or judge her, Tara began to learn how to praise herself, forgive herself, and heal herself. She read more, wrote more, found fragments of herself in every book she touched, every line she quietly penned. She no longer studied to be approved. She studied to understand. When no one agrees with you, that's when you start to truly listen to yourself. And when you have the courage to listen, you realize solitude was never your enemy. It was a silent teacher showing you how to become the truest version of who you are. Sometimes the quietest days are when you're growing the most. Tara walked through her solitude like walking through a forest, filled with fear, but also full of miracles. Because when she finally stepped out, she was no longer the same girl. She had found someone new, a Tara who could stand tall, think deeply, love freely, and most importantly, live truthfully as herself. Sometimes, you have to walk alone, because no one believes you'll make it to the end. After seeing the first faint light of knowledge, Tara began her journey of self-education. No schools, no teachers, just an old book, a few worn-down pencils, and a fragile belief that she could become someone different. She taught herself trigonometry, physics, and history, concepts she had never even heard of before. Everything felt distant, incomprehensible, like the language of another world. No one encouraged her. No one believed in her. There were only long nights, the dim glow of a kerosene lamp, and the quiet sound of her heartbeat echoing through the mountains. The first time she took the college entrance exam, Tara failed. But she didn't give up. She knew failure didn't mean she was stupid, only that she wasn't ready yet. So she began again. She reread every page, rewrote every formula, and repeated it all until she finally understood. To afford her studies, she woke at 4 a.m. to clean classrooms for other students. While others slept, she worked. While others rested, she learned. Some nights, her hands went numb, her eyes burned from exhaustion. But the thought of knowledge, the light it promised, kept her standing. In those solitary days, Tara realized that learning was more than an act of the mind. It was a test of perseverance, a way of proving to herself, I can be different. No one saw her trying. No one knew how many frozen nights she had endured, her breath the only companion in the silence. But she kept going, step by step, quietly, persistently. Silent effort is how you shout at destiny. I haven't given up. Every night was a battle between despair and hope. Sometimes Tara wondered if any of this truly mattered, if she was chasing a dream that wasn't real. But then, amid the weariness, she heard a soft voice within her whisper, "Keep going, just one more step." That voice carried her through her darkest days. Tara didn't study to be praised, or to prove she was better than anyone. She studied to believe that even when born in darkness, a person can still light their own way. And sometimes, you don't need anyone to see you. As long as you're still walking forward, that alone is enough to win against your own fate. Sometimes, to be free, you have to accept losing even the people you love most. After years of silence, Tara finally chose to speak her truth. She exposed her violent brother, the one who had hurt her body and spirit for so many years. But the price of truth was heavy. Her parents didn't believe her. They said she was possessed, that knowledge had corrupted her, that she had betrayed her faith, and that she was no longer their daughter. Tara was cast out by the very family that had once been her entire world. In that pain, she felt love, hatred, and fear all at once. Love because blood still binds. Hatred for the wounds buried deep in her past. And fear because she knew that once she walked away, there would be no path back. She fell into despair. There were days when Tara couldn't tell what was real anymore. She doubted her own memories. She asked herself if she had gone mad, if she had truly betrayed them. Every time she thought of her parents, her heart clenched in unbearable ache. Yet amid that chaos, a truth began to surface. A lesson no one had ever taught her, but one that everyone must one day learn, that love doesn't always mean staying, that forgiveness doesn't mean enduring more pain, and that sometimes, to remain yourself, you have to leave the people who cannot love you without hurting you. Tara once thought that growing up meant achieving success, earning recognition, but she realized that true maturity is the courage to lose everything you once feared losing, just to keep hold of yourself. It was a painful loss, but also the moment she was reborn. She was no longer the frightened girl who needed her parents' approval. She stood in the wide open world, alone yet free, vulnerable yet real. You can love someone and still choose to walk away, because freedom too deserves protection. Tara understood that love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes the greatest form of love is having the strength to say goodbye, with gratitude, not bitterness. In the end, she let go of old attachments, of the hunger to be accepted, of the illusion that everything can be mended. Because true freedom isn't about winning or proving anything. It's the moment you no longer need to, not to anyone, not even to yourself. Tara walked away, carrying both her memories and her scars. But this time she wasn't running. She was walking toward the light, lighter, calmer, and finally strong enough to live as her truest self. When you become educated, the world doesn't change, but the way you see it does. After years of solitude and struggle, Tara received scholarships to study at Cambridge and later at Harvard, two places she hadn't even known existed when she was a child. She began writing her dissertation on history, but each sentence she wrote was more than academic research. They were fragments of memory being stitched back together, wounds finally being named. She wasn't just writing about the history of humankind. She was rewriting her own, from a child born in darkness to a woman who dared to face the light. The more she learned, the more she understood that knowledge isn't a tool for proving oneself. It's a bridge for understanding. To understand the world, to understand others, and to understand oneself. Each page, each lecture was like a mirror reflecting the journey she had taken, where pain slowly dissolved in the light of awareness. Through that journey, Tara discovered something simple yet profound. Her parents weren't evil. They were simply uneducated, never taught how to love without control, never taught that faith doesn't have to walk hand in hand with fear. And in realizing that, she no longer blamed them, because forgiveness doesn't always mean returning. Sometimes it just means laying down the burden in your heart so you can move forward lighter. Knowledge helped Tara redefine her own worth, not through titles or degrees, but through self-awareness, the understanding that she had the right to be free, to choose her own beliefs, and to shape her own life. Now, as she stood in vast lecture halls among people from every corner of the world, Tara no longer felt small. She understood that knowledge didn't make her better than anyone. It made her understand more, feel more, and be at peace with herself. Once your eyes have seen the light, you can never return to the darkness you came from. Tara never went back to her old home, but in her heart, her family still lived there. In a different form, gentler, with less bitterness. She realized that freedom doesn't mean walking away. It means learning to live with your past without being chained to it. When Tara became educated, she didn't just open the door to knowledge. She opened another door, the one that led to herself. And perhaps that is the truest meaning of being educated, not to rise above, but to journey inward, to see, to understand, and to finally love yourself. You can't choose the cards life deals you, but you can choose how to play them. And Tara Westover's journey is proof of that. From a girl raised in fear, surrounded by violence and silence, through years of loneliness and pain, Tara found herself through learning. Everything she endured led her to one simple truth. Real strength doesn't come from circumstance. It comes from within. She learned how to transform pain into meaning, to turn the past into a light that guides the present. Because only when we dare to face the darkness do we realize that hidden inside it, there's always a seed of light waiting to grow. Inner strength isn't born from happiness. It's shaped through falling and rising again, through nights of tears when you still choose to keep going, through wounds that could have broken you, but instead taught you how to love more deeply. The strong are not those who never feel pain, but those who have learned to walk with it, more lightly, more wisely, more awake. Like a pearl formed from a wound, a person begins to truly shine only when they dare to face and transform what once hurt them. So when you stop running from your pain, it ceases to be a burden and becomes energy. Energy to live, to learn, to be free. Tara realized that freedom doesn't come from leaving a place behind. but from being strong enough to stay with yourself, even when everything around you falls apart. She no longer needed to prove anything, to be forgiven or to be recognized. It was enough to know that she had walked through it all and still kept her heart pure. We cannot change the cards we are dealt, but we can choose how to play them, with courage, with understanding, and with love for ourselves. When you learn to look inward instead of running away, you realize freedom was never far. It was always there, quietly waiting for you to be strong enough to reach it. And once your heart is steady, no one can imprison you again. Because true freedom isn't about how far you travel outward, but how deeply you journey within. Everyone can be educated, not only in schools, but through the act of rebuilding one's own life. Tara Westover's story is not just about escaping a strict family. It's a reflection of all of us, still learning, day by day, to break free from the limits within ourselves. Educated isn't only about knowledge, it's about awakening. Because sometimes, the most important lessons aren't found in books, but in the courage to look at yourself with honesty and compassion. Writing a few thoughts, or simply sitting quietly to listen to yourself, can be the beginning of a new journey. Because learning, at its core, is not about becoming better than others, but about becoming freer within your own soul. If this video touched you, share it with someone who might need a small light in their darkness, because perhaps you too are already that light, helping someone find their way home. Juliana Gray, where we learn together, grow together, and become a little better every day.